But it feels like movies are kind of coming back too. Like we're making more and more movies out from when I was a kid. Now there's like another one. I saw an ad during the Super Bowl. They're making a seventh Scream movie. Seventh Scream. First one came out, from what I understand, in 1996. And I saw it, and it scared me a little bit. I was, 10 at that time. But then I thought about it. I don't really do, scary movies. I don't get it. I don't like to be afraid. I don't like to get scared. I don't like to be jumpy. Some people love those movies. Totally great. If you do, if you're going to see the seventh one, by all means, let me know how it is. I don't plan to see it. But if you want to, go ahead. And if you like scary movies, that's great. But I don't like being afraid. And the idea of fear is what we're really going to touch on today. And fear comes in a variety of forms and flavors. It can be a lot. Okay, and you're welcome that the discussion question wasn't what's your greatest fear, because I did contemplate that one, but we didn't go there today. Okay, but fear, part of it, the issue is fear can be really overwhelming. It can be a lot. But I want us to think about this and really hold to this, that faith overwhelms fear because God is faithful in our fear. Faith overwhelms fear because God is faithful in our fear. We are in week 2 of our series on the life of Abraham called Walk of Faith. Each week, we're going to see different elements of Abraham walking out his faith. And today we'll touch on fear, but let's recap really quickly. If you weren't with us last week or you need a refresher, it started with Abram being called by God. He was a man of means, man of wealth, but God called Abram to go to a new land. That call came with a covenant or with a promise we talked about last week, that Abram was to go and then God would bless him. God was going to make his name great, turn his family into a great nation. Abram would then be a blessing to others. And Abram goes. He went in obedience to God. And as he traveled, he built altars to God. He marked the presence of God in all the places he had traveled. But the big part was Abram went, and he went in obedience to God. But remember, there was that promise made to Abram. Promise from God, and it hadn't yet come to fulfillment. And that's where part of our issue comes in today. So we are going to start in Genesis 12 with verse 10. We're going to read 10 to 20 today. We'll start with verses 10 to 16. Chris will have it up here behind me, marked on the Bibles on your tables. If you want to follow along, tablets, phones, computers, all great. Will be Genesis chapter 12, starting in verse 10. As usual, I will be in the NIV translation. It says this. Now there was famine in the land. And Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but let you live. Say, you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into this palace. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. We're going to stop there. So there is now a famine in the land. Famine, I used my Bible dictionary actually a lot for this message, and the Zondervan Dictionary says a famine was an acute and prolonged food shortage, usually caused by lack of rain, sometimes by hailstorms. These were not at all infrequent in ancient Egypt and Palestine. We go throughout the Bible, we hear many times about famine. But it's a difficult time, and this is going to be the first real obstacle, real test for Abram's faith. See, God made a promise to Abram, right? But famine seems like it could delay, it could hinder that fulfillment of the promise. And think about it for a minute, right? Abram is in a homeland where he's comfortable. God leads him to another place. Well, that place now has famine. He's in trouble in that place, and Abram has to figure out how to respond. So they move towards Egypt in hopes of finding food, being able to care for themselves and those around them. And here's where it gets interesting. Okay, they're arriving in Egypt, and Abram says to his wife Sarai, hey, Sarai, you're really beautiful. Right? It's a nice comment, right? Husbands want to tell their wives they're beautiful. But then he says, all the Egyptian men are going to think the same thing. And they're going to kill me so they can have you. So here's what you're going to do. Tell them all you're my sister so that they'll spare me. And actually, he'll be treated really well. Now, this actually isn't a full-blown lie. We learn in Genesis 20:12, they're actually half siblings. They have the same father, different mothers. At this time, this type of marriage was permitted. Later on, it becomes prohibited with Mosaic law, but for the time now, it was a permitted marriage. So Abram wants to only be known as Sarai's brother. It'll keep him safe. It would actually give him negotiating power and some status on her behalf. And it starts to play out just how he thought. They get to Egypt. The men there find Sarai beautiful. She's taken into Pharaoh's palace. From there, Abram's rewarded. He gets sheep, he gets cattle, he gets donkeys, he gets servants, and it's all going how he anticipated. Until verse 17 kicks in. Let's read 17 to 20. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife, Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. What have you done to me, he said. Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. God steps in, and it's actually a good thing. Because even though Abram may have thought, this is going well, or at least, we're safe, that's not what God thought. God inflicts, powerful word here, inflicts serious disease on Pharaoh and his household. And it is clearly written, it is because Sarai is there. God doesn't want Sarah to be with Pharaoh. See, Sarai is part of the plan that God established with Abram. And Pharaoh somehow knows this disease has to do with Sarai. So he calls Abram and he's like, dude, why did you do this? And we don't actually know what Abram says back. We're not clued in on that. But we do know Pharaoh sends Sarai back to Abram and says, get out. But Abram got to take everything with him. Pharaoh didn't keep anything as payment or punishment. He just said, take your wife, take your stuff, get out. This whole episode started with a setback, with that famine, and Abram's fear of what famine will do. So we need to look at the temptation or how we can see fear actually overwhelm our faith. Like we talked about earlier, faith overwhelms fear, but it's really easy for fear to overwhelm our faith. So what is fear? That Saved Bible Dictionary says fear, gives a couple definitions. It's the apprehension of evil or danger that causes fight or flight. Second piece is it's awe and reverence for the presence of God. Now, biblically, we hear a lot about that second part. Fear of God and fear of the Lord. And this isn't being afraid of God because he might hurt us. But it's a reverence and awe and a respect for who God is and his position in our lives. And it takes a healthy fear of the Lord to follow God well. It was needed in the Old Testament. For all of Moses' followers that followed God after the Ten Commandments, they needed to have a healthy fear of the Lord, have a respect for God and his position. But then there's the first part of that definition. Being fearful of things or people that might hurt us or that are really difficult or make us uneasy, and that fear takes a toll. It can debilitate, it can demoralize, and nobody is immune to that type of fear, no matter how upright you might be. In John 19, we hear the story of a guy named Joseph of Arimathea. He's the guy that had so much love and respect for Jesus that he's the one that got Jesus down off the cross and properly buried him. He did this great thing. But in verse 38, we hear he feared the Jewish leaders still. He still feared the Jewish leaders. Great dude, did a great thing, still had fear. And the really hard thing is I was wrestling through this week and thinking about it is so many times in the Bible we read, do not fear. It says, do not fear. Joshua 1:9. Joshua is going to become the leader of God's people after Moses dies. Do not fear. Isaiah 41:10, one of the most famous passages in the Bible. It says, God's the helper to his people. Do not fear. Jesus, in Luke 12:7, he encourages disciples, don't be afraid. He's like, there are so many sparrows in the land, and God values the sparrows. You're more important, more valuable than those sparrows, so God will protect you and value you. Do not fear. And we could keep going. But it says, do not fear. And I don't think the heart of these teachings is to avoid fear, because it happens. It's a feeling. The heart is to not let the fear overwhelm us and take over us, and that's when we run into issues. So we're going to look at a few things that I think fear can do to us. And the first is to make us really want to do things on our own. Go into survival mode. And Abram did this, and it's really understandable why. There was no food. He had his wife, he had people he's in charge of, responsible for. There was no food, so he goes to Egypt. But Abram makes all of his decisions, all of his plans on his own, out of his own fear to need and protect himself to survive. It's a survival mode. You ever going along on the road and you see a little squirrel in the middle of the road, right? And they're sitting there. And then the car comes. What's the squirrel do? Darts to the left. Now it darts to the right. Now it like chases its own tail. It spins in circles. All this kind of stuff. It goes crazy, right? And then eventually it darts off the road, hopefully. Because there's all these things. It goes into survival mode in that little squirrel mind. Every once in a while, we take on that little squirrel mind. Because most of us, we have a natural inclination to protect ourselves or to do something, anything, to make ourselves not feel afraid. But in those times, how clearly are we seeing? How clearly are we thinking? Is our vision clear? Are we seeing everything around us, the whole picture? Usually not. But God is and God does. But we cut God out of the picture because we aren't looking to him. We aren't looking for him. The tendency we might have is like, I got no time to wait on God now. I'm afraid. I got to do something about this. I got no time to wait. I don't have time to look for him. I got to go. I got to do this now. I need to make this better. And you know what? I can. I'm smart. I'm capable. I'm an adult. I can do this. You ever feel that way? I can do it. I do. That's a pride thing, but I feel it, right? I'm smart. Maybe I'm a little wise. I can get through this. Or maybe you don't feel that way, but you're like, I better be able to deal with this on my own, because if I don't, I'm a total failure. I'm disappointing everybody around me, and surely God's just going to give up on me. Do you hear all that sounds? This is fear overwhelming our faith. See, fear says fix it all by yourself with nobody else. You have to do it. While faith says, let God help. Let God guide in that fear. And there may be actionable things you need to do, but let those come from faith in God, not the fear inside of yourself. A consequence of fear overwhelming faith is we try to do things on our own and without God. And another one is we go off the path. We easily go off the path that God leads us. We can become selfish or disobedient. Look at Abram for a second. His words, they will kill me. Me. He's looking out for number one. He's looking out for himself. He put his wife at risk with what he did. We don't know what's going to happen to her as part of Pharaoh's harem. And he actually puts God's promise at risk. Because part of God's promise is that Abram and Sarai are going to become this great family with a great nation. Well, what if Sarai gets pregnant by Pharaoh? Now Abram's not the father. Abram went off the path of God because of fear. Fear takes us off the path of faith. Fear will say, you matter, protect yourself, others don't matter as much. Take care of you even at the expense of others. Now, faith doesn't say you don't matter. Faith doesn't say you shouldn't care for yourself. But it says see others in the midst of your own fear. Practically, fear taking off of God's path could take a variety of forms. Maybe you have a fear of losing your job. So you deal with it by throwing a colleague under the bus, right? There's cutbacks coming and you go, hey boss, you know, Sebastian over there in accounting, he's got some sticky fingers and he enters the numbers wrong. He screwed that up. Or Timmy over there in sales, he made a promise, we can't actually come through with that. He's lying to him. You unnecessarily throw somebody under the bus. It's fear acting in selfishness and scapegoating or even betrayal, while faith would act in kindness and compassion and love. Fear pushes us so far inward that all we can see is ourselves. Faith pushes us outward to see others even in the midst of our own fear. Watch for that selfishness coming out. Fear also leads to disobedience. Faith is a path of obedience, and fear takes us off that. It could come in behavior. Lying's the one that sticks out the most for me, right? You got the kid that's playing baseball outside, throws the ball and breaks the window of the house, and he's scared of getting in trouble. So he says to mom or dad or the neighbor, whoever it is, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. Many of us have had that broken window kind of moment. Lying or some other behavior that takes us off of God's path. Disobedience could also be you're coming to the fork in the road of life, and you turn left when God is clearly saying, go right. There's an old quote that's often attributed to the famous baseball player and manager Yogi Berra. It says, when you come to the fork in the road, take it. Come to the fork in the road, take it. And one story is actually that he said this in giving directions to his home, because apparently when you would go to his house, you came to a fork, and no matter which way you went, you got to his house at like the same thing. But it became attributed to kind of psychologically, take action and embrace a decision. See, we're going to come to forks in the road, but we need to take the direction God is leading and the path is leading. Where fear may tell us, go the other way, take the other prong of that fork. You know, if you know God's called you to something, right? God's called you to something right over here, but something about that gives you fear, gives you some trepidation. It's like, man, go connect with that person. But then there's a fear of, what will people think? How hard will it be? How much energy do I have to give that person? How much time do I have to give that person? How am I going to get my stuff done over here? So fear pushes us to go the other way. Fear pushes us off the path, while faith makes us pause to stay on the path. Fear also fills the gaps. Last week we heard about the promise that was made to Abram. That's how this whole thing started, but now we have a gap. The gap between that promise being made and the promise being fulfilled, right? The fulfillment wasn't instant. Fear took hold of that gap for Abram. There's a trend, it's going on for years now, but between like high school and college, or like college and going into the work world, people are taking a gap year, they call it. It's an intentional time of between two phases of life. Maybe for travel, you get some life experience, work, volunteering, and there are many people that have said it's helped them with focus or direction or clarity. But the idea is doing something, there's an intentional gap between two phases of life. There will be times where we're going to feel like we have a gap with God. Maybe we don't plan on it, maybe we don't want it, but it's going to be there and we have to handle it well. And here's what it can look like. God has given all of us, as followers of Jesus, the promise of eternal life. We all have it. But the fulfillment of that promise comes later. We have confidence in that promise, faith in that promise, we believe in that promise, but he's not fulfilling it until later. Or maybe you've had a time where you've really connected well with God. You've got this clear sense of what God's going to do in your life, and that's awesome. I hope we've all had those moments or will have those times. But what he's going to do, it's not happening quite yet. There's that gap again, and fear loves that gap. Fear fills that gap. Fear says, hey, Geoff, what's up, man? God hasn't done it yet. Is he really going to do it? He's this all-powerful, all-knowing, everywhere God. Why is he making you wait? Right? That doesn't make sense. We have to wait for very little in our world today. Right? I could order my groceries when I'm finished up service here and probably pick them up this afternoon. I could stream a movie or TV show. I can transfer money to pay my bills without sending a check. If I have a question, I can Google it or ask Siri, Alexa, Gemini, or whatever one you got out there. Back in the day, do you remember waiting for maybe an encyclopedia had to get returned to the library before you could do homework on it? Or even if we take it a step further, ever be on dial-up internet back in the day? Ding, 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 that noise? That was just to get you connected. Then you had to wait for the page to load. Ever feel like God's on dial-up? Moving a little slow? God's not slow. He's steady, but he's not slow. We have to accept God's pace. And part of that is remembering that the gap we experience, that gap that we have between hearing from God and God fulfilling a promise or fulfilling something he said, that gap is not God's absence. You don't have to fill it with something else. Just hold to God's presence in that gap. The problem is, fear really wants you to doubt God in that gap. Doubt God's promises. Doubt God's presence. Fear says, fill that gap with something good. This substance fills the gap, it feels good. This pleasure fills the gap, it feels good. This attitude fills the gap, and it might feel really good. But for how long? When we fill the gap out of fear, it's an empty feeling. If any of you have ever looked at food and nutrition, maybe you've heard the phrase empty calories. And what those mean is it might give you some short energy or feel full for a little bit, but there's no real nutritional benefit to what that is. Fear fills the gap with that. Things that aren't really valuable, but they might feel good or seem good in the moment. Fear tells us, fill that gap. Waiting is just going to make you anxious, make you edgy, make you impatient. Faith says, be patient. Be calm and hold to God in that gap. Don't try to jump the gap. Don't try to fill the gap. Let faith take over the fear of that gap. Because God's faithful even in the fear we experience. God is faithful. He was faithful to Abram and the promise he made to him. He got both Abram and Sarai away from the situation Abram got them into. The method was wild, right? He made all of Pharaoh's family really sick. But then Abram and Sarai were able to leave, unharmed with everything they came with, and the promise of God fully intact. God wasn't as faithful. He doesn't let you down. He always comes through. The weather sort of has been making us think it's spring, right? Not so much today, but earlier in the week. And in spring, I love to start grilling brats. I am a tried and true Wisconsin kid through and through, and beer brats are where it's at. Nobody makes brats like Wisconsin. You're lying if you say otherwise, okay? Now, I have a really good brat recipe, right? I've made it the same way for years. I won't change it no matter what anybody tells me to. Am I stubborn? Sure. But I also think I'm right, because my brats are great, okay? They should look kind of like that, too. That's a nice color on those. Those aren't mine, but that looks good. Now I'm hungry. My brat recipe always comes through for me. It's never let me down. My brat recipe is very faithful to me. God is more faithful than my brat recipe. He just is. See, God's always faithful, and he's stronger than fear. He's not going to let us down in our fear. He's not going to leave us in our fear. He won't abandon his promise to us in our fear or when we're waiting for him to do what he's promised. Why? Because he's faithful. But here's the thing. We need to be faithful back to God. If we want the strength of God in our fear, if we want the presence of God in our fear, if we want the peace of God in our fear, we have to hold to God in our fear. We have to believe our faith will overwhelm our fear. when our fear is trying to overwhelm us. You want to know how to do it? Going back to those spiritual disciplines and spiritual practices again. Because the more you're in Scripture, the more of God's faithfulness you will see throughout the Bible. The more you're in prayer, the more of God's faithfulness you will see in your own life. The more you fast and substitute God in place of something, the more you're going to taste the faithfulness of God. The more you're in community with other believers in God, the more you will recognize and experience God's faithfulness all around you. So take in God's faithfulness to you. And then share it if you would. Something a little different I want to try. But if you have an experience with prayer or fasting or Scripture and community that you would be willing to share up here for just like a minute or two, I would actually love for that to happen at any point in the coming weeks. I think it would be so powerful to hear from each other about what God is doing in our lives. You don't need to hear from me anymore, but from somebody else. So let me know if you have an experience with that you would be comfortable sharing for a minute or two. Because here's the thing, God is faithful to each and every one of us in different ways. He is and always will be faithful in our fear. His faithfulness and our faith in him is stronger than fear. So keep that in mind. And keep in mind what fear tries to do to us. We'll wrap up here. Fear tries to overtake our faith. Fear wants us to do things on our own. We got to fix it. Make yourself feel better. We're good enough. We're a failure if we don't do it. Fear says, do it your way. Well, faith says, listen to God's way. Fear pushes us off the path. Fear says, throw somebody else under the bus. Follow your own direction. Make your own turn. Fear pushes us. Faith makes us pause for God. Fear wants to fill the gaps. There's going to be time between a promise God has made and the fulfillment of that promise. Fear says, God's absent in that time. He left you during that. Fear says, fill it with something else good right now. Faith says, man, be patient. It's coming, and God is still active and present. Just wait on him there. And God's always faithful. God comes through. It's impossible for him not to come through. Keep your faith in him. Keep spending time with him and in his presence and with other followers of Jesus. See, fear's going to come, but it doesn't have to overwhelm us. Faith overwhelms fear because God is faithful in our fear. Let's pray. God, I thank you for today. God, I thank you for your faithfulness. God, how strong your presence is in our lives. And God, that your faithfulness is with us in our fear, God, that your faithfulness to us and our faith back in you will overwhelm the fear. So God, I pray for any fear any of us have in our lives over anything, big or small. If it's trying to overwhelm us, if it is overwhelming us, God, if it's trying to push us around, God, I pray that we'd stop. We'd stop and we would come to you. We'd turn to you, we would look to you, and we would be reminded of our faith in you, God, and your strength in our lives. God, that faith says, you don't leave us, you don't abandon us, that your promises always come through. God, I pray that we would hold to those promises you have made, God, that we would hold to you in the midst of our fear, God, so when we experience it, when we feel it, God, that we would pause. God, we would get on our knees and just come to you. We thank you that you're there in that time. In your name, amen.